Yes, my name is Alistair Yeomans. I'm representing the Plant Health Alliance, and I'm going to cover two things quickly in the presentation today. First of all, future threats, and secondly, the Plant Healthy Certification Scheme. Rather worryingly, when the first question was asked, how much do you know about plant bacterial pathogens, I had to answer a little. So on the future threats front, I'll be fairly quick. In terms of looking for future threats, the first place I would go to would be the UK Plant Health Risk Register. This is a really good resource. It's a resource that's being added to all the time. It's run by FERA. And ultimately what you're able to do is search for a plant pest or host organism. As you can see, there's 1,232 pests on the risk register at the moment, and you're able to download the entire risk register as a CSV file. So I've done that, and what I've done is just organize it for, I just selected only the bacterial pathogens, as you'll see in column 2 from the left-hand side. And what I've also done is organized it in a way of what the relative risk rating is after regulatory requirements have been implemented for the UK. So in terms of tree diseases, I've just highlighted a few at the top. The first one is a rather worrying one, hazel. I thought hazel had been getting off a bit lightly in terms of tree diseases, but you can see there's a Pseudomonas avellanae species that affects hazel, but thankfully that is absent in the country at the moment. The second highlighted Pseudomonas is the one that Sarah's just spoken about, which is the horse chestnut bleeding canker. And then the third one is Xylella fastidiosa, which is what I will actually touch upon in terms of a specific organism. So Xylella has really been one of the main main drivers behind the Plant Healthy Certification Scheme. I think it's what really woke the ornamental horticulture sector up to the threat posed by plant pests. I think foresters had already been woken up about 10 years ago when ash dieback came in. But Xylella is a particularly worrying pest because it has such a wide host range. And at the last count, I think it was 595 species are known to be susceptible to Xylella. A lot of people have heard of the pathogen in relation to olive groves, and here we can see a rather sickly olive grove, if not completely dead in some cases, in southern Europe. But worryingly, it can also infect a very wide range of plants, including some garden favorites such as lavender and rosemary. So it's a polyphagous pathogen, and as such is particularly worrying because it can move between ornamental species potentially and forestry species, so out into the wider countryside. In terms of its life cycle, top left, you can see, I think that's an electron microscope photograph of the bacteria blocking up the xylem cells in the plant. So it actually blocks up the water pathways. It's spread by an insect vector, frog hopper or spittle bug. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see it just starting to take effect on an almond tree. And top right-hand corner, you can see it again on an olive grove. And as I say, it's been causing tremendous damage in olive groves in southern Italy, but also I've done some work in Mallorca over the last few years. It's been causing considerable damage, particularly on the almond groves out there. It's the most wicked of plant pathogens because it has unfortunately has a latency period, and on olives I think it can be up to about 4 years before you can actually see the disease starting to manifest itself. So detecting it's particularly difficult. And to make matters worse, some of the hosts actually have a tolerance to it, and they can live seemingly quite happily with Xylella in the system, thereby being a sort of reservoir. So a big question I have is what that means in terms of breeding for resistance, because I suppose if you breed for tolerance, then you still have a plant in the landscape that can potentially act as a reservoir and spread it to other plants. But that's a question that I'll have and probably leave for the Q&As. In terms of Xylella in trees, it can infect a wide range of trees. The Bridget project, I recommend going to the Bridget website or the RHS website, have some very good resources on various genera of woody vascular plants. Most of them are common forestry species. Bridget also produced a very good YouTube video. You just need to put Helen Mirren Xylella into YouTube, and it will be a sort of 5-minute overview of Xylella and how it impacts, or it can potentially impact, the horticultural sector. Essentially, it goes through it discusses the polyphagous nature of the pathogen, that it's got a broad host range, and ultimately what would happen if it did arrive in this country. It would be pretty detrimental, I think it's fair to say, to the horticulture industry, because if it does arrive at a garden centre or horticulture business, it will essentially result in a 5-kilometre movement restriction zone around that business, i.e. the business would have to stop trading. So what are the implications for the horticulture sector? Well, unfortunately, the most common pathway for plant pests to be moved into a new area is through the movement of live plants. Evidence shows that notifiable plant pests and pathogens are being spread within the UK horticulture sector. I think Sarah was the lead on the Phyto Threats project, which is very much worth a look if you have an opportunity to do so. And in terms of imports, about 90% of all trade in terms of value of plants and plant commodities are imported into this country at the moment. So it's a supply chain issue. And what we're trying to do is stop high risk plant material moving through the supply chain. So we set up the plant health certification scheme. Many people have worked on it way before I came along. The website is planthealthy.org.uk. The governing body for the certification scheme, it's a broad church of organizations, government, third sector, trade organizations representing horticulture, forestry, and general land management. That was set up in 2018. We produced a standard through a process of fairly wide consultation, but the thing with standards is they do evolve, so we will look to improve it. At the moment, there's 23 requirements, and what we're really trying to do is have a standard that reflects the reality of the trade situation, which I referred to earlier. We brought in a couple of important international concepts of the pest risk analysis. We tweaked it slightly to apply it to a site of a business and its operations, and appropriate level of protection, which is essentially managing risk down to an appropriate level. Importantly, it's a systems approach or a proactive approach, which I'll come on to. So reactive approaches essentially rely on endpoint inspections, or traditionally they have done. And I suggest going to this reference, a systems approach for the management of pests and pathogens of nursery crops. The link's up there, but you can Google it and it should come up fairly quickly, or fairly high up on the search results. What we're really trying to encourage is a systems approach, which is essentially looking to correct unsafe practices on nurseries and horticultural businesses, and put in a range of biosecurity measures from sort of cradle to grave in terms of the plant production process. It's a voluntary standard, but importantly, what we've tried to do is build it on top of regulatory systems, so that there's a seamless sort of journey from regulation through to enhanced voluntary standards. Ultimately, what it is a HACCP, or hazard analysis of critical control points type system, and it's broken down into basically 3 main areas, which is initiation, pest risk assessment, and pest risk management. You can find this diagram on the back of the Plant Health Management Standard. And ultimately what we're trying to do, as I say, is manage risk down to an appropriate level of protection. So from high risk plant material, trying to put measures in place to bring it down to low risk. We have a number of nurseries signed up at the moment. We have one retailer. We also want to relate it to landscaping, our horticulture businesses and public gardens. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is send independent auditors out to certify businesses. And as I say, what we're looking to do is to take that high risk plant material and reduce it down to an appropriate level of protection so it can safely move through the supply chain. I've just put this slide in because I think it's important to understand that I think it's a human challenge as well. The first one is one of awareness. The second one is action. I think we tend to react, and obviously what we're trying to do, I think the name gives it away, is create a proactive system, i.e. to stop any pests spreading or indeed being introduced in the first place. And also ensure that that people are really committed to it, because as we know, it's part of the human condition that when we are faced with a catastrophe, we tend to react very quickly, put in measures, and if we don't have any other incidents of a catastrophe, whether it's a wildfire or a plant pathogen, we start to relax and our effort slackens. So knowledge, taking a proactive approach, or knowledge sharing, should I say, taking a proactive approach and sustaining that proactive approach is absolutely key to ensuring that we tackle plant health appropriately here in the UK. We have quite a number of nurseries signed up now. You can see those on the website. And ultimately what we're trying to do is get a real interaction between the nurseries and the standards so that we start to develop it in a way that's realistic and effective. And on that, I'll say thank you very much for asking me to speak today.